Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to those online for this Cabinet meeting. John, do we have any apologies for absence?
None received.
Do we have any declarations of interest?
Yeah, I'd like to declare a personal but non-prejudicial interest in the item 3C on the agenda.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and similarly, the same item, prejudicial interest in my case. I'm very friendly with the owner of the house in question.
Okay. Does that mean that you will leave the meeting?
I will. I'll wait outside.
Thank you very much.
Don't forget me.
Yeah, and on a similar vein, I also know the owner of the property.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Callard. We have feedback from the special performance and overview scrutiny of the 3rd of December that was looking at secondary schools leadership funding, and that is duly noted. And I'd like to extend my thanks to the chair and the members of that scrutiny committee for taking the time to send us written feedback. So I'll take us on to item 4, the draft revenue and capital budget proposals. That's over to you, Councillor Callard.
Thank you, Leader. Today, I'm bringing to Cabinet our draft budget for the 2025-2026 financial year. This budget aims to protect the most disadvantaged and vulnerable people in Monmouthshire, both young and old. This year, we are prioritising our most valuable neighbourhood services, which play a crucial role in maintaining the quality of our life in our communities and preserving a wonderful environment for the future. However, setting the budget for 2025-2026 is again challenging. It's widely acknowledged that for many years, funding for local government has not kept pace with the increase in demand for services and the increases in the cost of providing these services. We estimate that the cost of providing our services will increase by £23.7 million compared with the current year. And this is the 3rd year in a row where the cost of providing our services has increased by over £20 million. The Council is facing cost pressures resulting from increasing demand for high-cost council services, which are predominantly centred around the service areas of social care and children's additional learning needs. Our proposed net revenue budget for 2025-2026 is £216 million, representing an 8% increase over the 2024-2025 budget. 62% of the budget is funded by Welsh Government grants, with the remainder coming from council tax. The draft budget for 2025-2026 safeguards essential services for our residents, including continued waste collection services and the retention of all our leisure centres, recycling centres, libraries and community hubs. We will increase spending on our most vital frontline services. Social care and health funding is proposed to rise by 10.6% and education funding by 10.7%. We are committing over £2 million of further capital investment into essential infrastructure, particularly our highways. This will fund improvements to our carriageways, footpaths, structures, and our fantastic public rights-of-way network. This is in addition to the £1 million we allocated last year for investment in these areas. We will also invest in our foster care service to attract and retain valued carers while recognising their essential skills, patience, time, and the necessary resources to support some of the most vulnerable children in our county. This increase in spending on our services is made possible by a positive approach to council core revenue funding from the Welsh Government, alongside support from the Westminster Government. After accounting adjustments, this results in an additional £5.1 million in cash terms for the next year. To sustain this continued investment in our services, we are proposing an average council tax increase of 7.8%. However, despite this funding increase, we still face a budget gap of £2.9 million. We are working diligently to cover some of this gap through ongoing negotiations with the Welsh Government, which we expect will secure additional funding through our core revenue settlement in February. We believe in being fully transparent with our residents about these matters. You deserve to know that we are committed to delivering a balanced budget. Open and rigorous scrutiny and feedback are vital parts of the budget setting process, and we take these responsibilities seriously. Therefore, we'll be holding a public consultation from tomorrow, January the 23rd, to the 22nd of February, and we would welcome your value and input. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callard. Does anyone from Cabinet want to comment or ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Callard. I think just really want to, acknowledge and value the what we're proposing for social care in this budget. It is a significant increase in our budget, but also that still represents pressures that we're facing within the service are also higher than that. So it's a mixed bag for social care in terms of we're having to address some of those pressures both in the short and the long term, but we're also opportunities, as you said, to invest in the future. So I think the example you highlighted where we're putting in additional funding for our foster care network to try and retain and expand our really good family of foster carers in the council is very much a long-term move to try and reduce cost pressures within children's social care. And I think it's an example of what we're trying to do is making those investments now, even though some of those choices are quite hard, in order to secure longer term benefits for our residents and for our budget. So, and I think that's a good example of that. And we're trying to do so much of that in other aspects of the service as well, and in other services. So I really think it's been a quite rigorous process that we've gone through to come up with the social care budget proposals and probably with all of the budget proposals. And I think residents should be reassured that we're doing absolutely everything we can to both sustain the services for residents, knowing that we will continue to provide all of the services that residents rely on, that they're eligible for, at the same time as providing value for money for council taxpayers. So, yeah, thank you very much for bringing this budget forward.
Thank you, Councillor. I guess I'd probably add to that as well as a further demonstration of, I guess, the forward-thinking nature of this administration with regards to long-term sustainability. Item 3C on this agenda with our expansion of our in-house facilities for children with denied care.
Indeed, I think that's a very good example, and I hope Cabinet will approve that when we get to that item.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. I think it is so right, and so is the point that you've made. And I think as the impact assessment shows, the attention to look at deduction and mitigation measures as the process of the budget unfolded over the late autumn and winter months has been very strong this year. Catherine, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you. Yeah, just a very brief comment to say that I am pleased and relieved that we've been able to avoid negative impacts on neighbourhood services, and also that we've been able to allocate additional capital to highways and infrastructure. I would like to get my hands on a lot more, but I'm really grateful to colleagues for what we've managed to achieve with balancing out the conflicting needs and demands within the budget. So thank you.
Councillor Birch.
Obviously, there are choices in this budget that we'd prefer not to be facing, but I think one thing we can celebrate is how we've started to bring down the cost of homelessness. And that's been largely due to investment from the Welsh Government, the 10 million in social housing grant and transitional accommodation grant, which is starting to enable us to provide better temporary accommodation and permanent accommodation for households and bring down the cost to the council taxpayer as well. And I think it's that kind of investment where we can provide better for less that I think we're seeing in a number of situations. And I think I'd also like to say how impressed I've been with the resilience and enthusiasm of some of our colleagues in Heritage and arts and culture into actually tackling that challenge of reducing the subsidy that we're putting into services while still maintaining some exciting provision for everybody.
That's good to hear, Councillor Birch. Is there anybody else? In which case, I'd bring in Councillor John. Hello, Richard.
Good afternoon, Leader.
Good afternoon.
I think the first concern I have to raise about this this draft budget document is the great big hole in it. To be honest, you can't really call it a budget because this isn't a document that you could go and implement tomorrow. It's incomplete. Can you tell us, given that you have a legal responsibility to provide a balanced budget, why is there a black hole of nearly £3 million in the draft budget proposals? Even the most optimistic estimate of a funding floor won't even begin to cover that. So why aren't you being open and transparent with the public about the further cuts to services or council tax increases that you're going to have to make? This isn't a draft budget. It's not a complete document, and you shouldn't be consulting on it.
Thank you for the question, Councillor John. I would say that we are, well within our rights to present a draft budget with which is not balanced. You're right to say we've got a statutory duty to set a balanced budget, and I can assure you that we will be setting a balanced budget. I think in this case we have been a little bit of a passenger to external events with regards to further negotiations around funding. So you mentioned in your question a funding floor. For those watching, the floor would be a minimum settlement uplift from the Welsh Government, which, as Monmouthshire is the lowest, received the lowest increase from Welsh Government, we would be one of the authorities that would be lifted. Our funding would be lifted by the imposition of a minimum uplift in funding. You're right, and we've made no secret of it in the documents that with a funding floor in place, that we may still have a budget gap to close. I would say, in parallel to the discussions that are currently ongoing regards a funding floor, we also have a number of other, open topics regarding our budget for next year. They're both on the expenditure side, and we've talked a lot about the volatility in our social care services, for example, and also on the income side, such as potential increases in grant funding. I would say that at this time I am hopeful that we won't have to make any serious changes to our services off the back of this draft budget, because I'm in complete alignment with you that we need to be very open and give the public, a good opportunity in order to scrutinise our proposals. So that's my expectation, and you can rest assured that come the 6th of March, and indeed the 5th of March, when we come back to Cabinet to present our final proposals, they will be balanced.
Thank you. You've said that you are lobbying Welsh Government for a funding floor. I'm not sure that'll be helped by the leader's comments in the Senedd committee the other day that you all responded with relief, I think the leader said, when you saw the settlement. But what form are these discussions with Welsh Government taking? Are they simply discussions within the WLGA, or have you actually asked the Cabinet Secretary, Mark Drakeford, face-to-face for a funding floor? And if you have asked him, what did he say?
Thank you, Councillor John. I think I'll take that one. And of course, as a council, we were deeply relieved by the settlement because we were facing, under the previous UK government, 0%. We were facing a crisis had we have had that settlement imposed upon us. So to know that we had a new government in Westminster aligned to the government we have in Wales, which has categorically stated that they will support public services, was a relief. But moving on to your question of whether or not we'd had a discussion with Mark Drakeford, I have said previously in council and in cabinet that we have over the last 2.5, coming up to 3 years, done everything we can to develop strong and robust relationships with Welsh Government cabinet ministers and indeed with the First Minister, and something which was not true in previous administrations. So I can reassure you that I have, along with our acting CEO, had face-to-face meetings both with Mark Drayford and with the Cabinet Secretary for Housing and Local Government, not once, but on more than, I think, 3 occasions. And I'm intending to see him tomorrow as well. And I will continue on behalf of Monmouthshire to strongly put our case forward for the best settlement that we can get, whether that's via a floor or extra grants. That is yet to be decided. And I think we recognise that the Welsh Government is juggling with uncertainties at the moment, but we will hear in February what the outcome will be. But I, along with the whole of Cabinet, are very confident that we will receive a floor.
Okay, thank you. Can you explain what realignment of community hubs means? Because a cynic would think, in addition to the cuts to opening hours and whole day closures, which are alluded to in the document, a cynic might think that this also means downgrading of certain community hubs and moving them to smaller premises. Can you rule this out?
Thank you for the question, Councillor John. Yes, we can rule that out. We're not going to be downgrading community hubs and moving them to smaller premises. I think at the moment the proposals are, as you alluded to, adjustments in opening hours in order that we can minimise any impacts to those residents that rely on the services of our hubs.
Okay, thank you. And another service I wanted to touch on was Tintern Old Station. It's one of the biggest tourist attractions in the Wye Valley. It's got 4 stars on TripAdvisor, narrowly behind the 12th century Tintern Abbey. I think if you as Cabinet members had actually been there and seen for yourselves how valued and loved it is by residents, I don't think you would be putting this proposal forward. So have you actually been there? Have you seen for yourselves how popular it is as a family attraction? One of the biggest tourist attractions in the county. I can't believe that you're flogging such a valuable asset.
Councillor John, I'm not going to answer for the rest of Cabinet members, but I can assure you not only have I been there, taken my nieces and nephews, my daughters, my friends, and had many a pleasant picnic there, we are well aware of the attraction of Tintern Abbey. How about other council members? Have you been?
Many times.
Yeah, I've certainly been. I think
Maybe Councillor, maybe that's good news.
I'll come in there if I may as well, Leader. That you mentioned at the end there, Councillor John, about flogging Old Station. This is the proposal is not to sell it. The proposal is to offer it out for a lease, so it can be run on commercial terms. We hope it continues to thrive. I absolutely agree with you that it is it's a wonderful place to go and visit.
I'll move on now. Councillor,
okay, thank you for those answers.
You're welcome, Councillor John. See you tomorrow. Councillor Taylor, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Leader. And obviously, one of my questions is fairly similar to Councillor John's, but if I could just pose it, but just elaborate slightly then. So you say, my question was, how do you propose to meet the budget gap, obviously of 2.9 million, and you've talked about a funding floor, Leader, and obviously the Cabinet member has too, but you also alluded to the fact that that still may not meet the budget gap. Therefore, what would your proposals be in that scenario? Because I appreciate that you're trying, you're positive, you feel assured, I think you might have said, but in the event that it does not, what are your plans? Thank you, Lou.
I think, as you alluded to, Councillor Taylor, it's a very similar question to Councillor John's, and I would refer you to the answer that I gave him, but I would elaborate further and to say, I think it would be the wrong thing to do for us to propose service savings now that we do not have to implement. Like, it would cause confusion amongst the public, and I think it would devalue our consultation actually on the proposals that we are coming forward with. And I'll just lay that out in parallel, as I mentioned to Councillor John, that it is my expectation that we will not have to go back and make further significant savings within our services in order to balance this budget.
You have a second question, Councillor Taylor.
I do, thank you, Leader. And that was obviously, and you've given some assurances, but my concern was that if there are any other further proposals to come forward, then what scrutiny arrangements would be proposed for those, because clearly they would come forward too late for the council to scrutinise in any of the scrutiny forums, and also, it has to be said, to consult with the public over. So I appreciate you've responded that you don't want to confuse the public, but that surely is a concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. It is something that I'm very cognizant of. I would say part of the process, of course, the final budget will come back to Cabinet before it goes back to full council, and it will be the decision of full council whether or not to pass the final budget. And I expect a great deal of scrutiny during both of those meetings. But I would add, that I do agree with you that we need to make sure that where people are affected by any proposals that we have, that we do have an opportunity to talk it through with them. So, I would say in the unlikely event that we have to go further, with some of our service savings, I would certainly be reaching out to anybody who would be affected by that in order to get their views. If it was, for example, if it was a specific group, maybe people within our care, maybe it was to do with our education portfolio, I would definitely be looking for feedback on any proposals that we would put forward that might affect any of those. Although, as I said, our expectation at the moment is that we will not have to go further with our service savings proposals.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We have no more questions, so I'll move to the recommendations which Councillor Callard outlined to us. So, Cabinet, do we approve the release of the draft revenue budget proposals for the consultation that will run till the 22nd of February?
Yes.
It's approved, John. That we note the remaining revenue budget gap of 2.86 million at draft budget stage, which will need to be resolved in full by the time that the final budget is set by Council on the 6th of March. That we approve the release of the draft capital budget proposals and indicative capital budget for 2026, 27 and 2028, 29 for consultation.
Yeah.
That's also approved, both of those. That we note the implications of current uncertainties arising out of the Welsh Government's provisional local government budget announcement and our agreed response to Welsh Government. And that we are recommending the use of capital receipts totalling 3.7 million to fund revenue costs associated with organisational change that support the draft revenue budget proposals. We agreed.
Yep.
All those recommendations are agreed. John, thanks. So if we can move on to item 5, implementing the recommendations from the middle tier review. Over to you, Councillor Grocott.
Thank you. This is a piece of work at Welsh Government level that's been going on for some time now. It dates back to our former friend Leighton Andrews, who many of us will remember with fond memory. And it's about standards of achievement in schools and relates to the successful delivery of the curriculum, I guess. Members of Cabinet will appreciate that we are one of the authorities of South East Wales that sits in the Education Achievement Service, which carries out these responsibilities of support for schools and raising quality and standards in our schools. the review is around the extent to which this can be guaranteed by arrangements. And it is the view of Monmouthshire and other authorities that abut us that we are simply too small to have the wherewithal to be able to offer full and detailed review of the entire Welsh curriculum requirement for our schools, because of our size and the number of pupils we have in our schools. And therefore, in order to carry out our statutory duties, we need to remain within a wider organisation. And EAS will continue. It will continue in a different form. And I think there's a general agreement on that, because at the moment it does have a unique format in Wales, in that it is actually a company, established as a company with a board of directors and so on. And at the moment, there is a joint executive group of which I am the current chair, and the senior officer for children and young people and I have actually been at that organisation this afternoon. I see that there is a question from Councillor John about this at County Council. And I can assure him that we will continue to be active members of EAS, and we will not be trying to overthrow the organisation as such.
Thanks, Councillor Brokers. I think that's reassuring, actually. We do have a way forward, despite some uncertainties. Is there any comments, Cabinet? I'll bring in Councillor John then.
Okay.
He is.
Just got his camera off.
Richard?
And let the dog out.
In the interim, could we note that Councillor Griffiths joined us at 5 to 5? I will give Councillor John another minute. If not, I can ask the question on his behalf. He deserves an answer. Councillor John.
Oh,
We'd lost you
apologies,
for
I
a
was having
moment.
IT issues there. I support the recommendations and encourage any actions that promote further cooperation between secondary schools to maintain the breadth of the curriculum, particularly at key stages 4 and 5. But on the role of the Education Achievement Service, I think we need to recognise that no council has got the capacity to replicate in-house the breadth of experience that we can source through the EAS. So are you concerned about the prospect of any council pursuing an isolationist agenda, and what conversations are you having, particularly with Caerphilly, to ensure that all partners continue to commit to working together on school improvement? Because it benefits all of us, doesn't it?
What I would say is this afternoon, the senior officer for children and young people has sent to me a detailed answer to this. I can't immediately put my hand on it, but it does exist, and I'll be happy to give it to Councillor John at Council. But discussions that involve Caerphilly are still going on. Caerphilly was represented at EAS this afternoon, and it is not clear where they're going to end up. And I think some clarity in their position will be required at some point, but I will make sure that that's provided at Council, fear not.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
If you wish.
I can actually give it you on the leader's phone. The middle tier review presented an opportunity for all authorities in Wales to consider the review of the middle tier undertaken by Professor Dullan Jones. And it is right that each authority considers its own needs and capacity to meet them. In Monmouthshire, we believe that there is much to be gained from continuing collaboration across the Gwent footprint. The ability to engage perspectives from outside of Monmouthshire, both in terms of supporting schools and in terms of the broader knowledge exchange, is a key component in our support for the schooling system. The position in the paper that I bring today clearly reinforces this belief and sets out our commitment to further develop this. The strategic director, who is also the Chief Officer for Children and Young People, and the acting Chief Executive have been party to a number of meetings with Caerphilly and the other Gwent authorities to ascertain what any future collaboration could look like. It's an area which is seeing a significant amount of activity at the moment. We have had a long and positive history of collaborating across Gwent and with our partners in EAS. I'm committed to ensuring that the very best of those collaborations continues and supports our schools to be the very best that they can. And certainly one noticeable improvement is that school improvement officers, I think Will McLean and I are both looking forward with confidence to the day very shortly now when they are much more likely to be an officer taken from being one of our own school head teachers, working with others of our schools to support them and bring them on and help them to raise their standards. And I think that's a really positive step forward.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you very much.
Thanks for raising that issue, Councillor John. I know in your history as a councillor, you yourself have been Cabinet Member for Education, so I'd imagine this school improvement and the best for Monmouthshire in this regard is very much close to your heart.
And as a parent, I should probably declare an interest as well.
Not prejudicial, I hope. We have two recommendations, Cabinet. That we agree to extending a partnership with 3 other local authorities in the Gwent area, Newport City Council, Torfaen County Borough Council and Blaenau Gwent County Borough Council. We agreed?
Yep.
And the second one, just that we note, as you outlined, Councillor Grocott, that there's ongoing discussions between all 4 authorities. And I think you've made it very clear that we want to do as much as possible to ensure that we collaborate for the best interests of our children across Gwent. So thank you. That brings us on to the last item, item 6, the development of a supported accommodation provision. Over to you, Councillor Chandler.
Yeah, thank you.
Time off. I'm going on.
Yeah, just noting that Councillor Grocott is leaving the room because of his declared interest. Yeah, so thank you, Leader. So fellow Cabinet members, I'm seeking your approval to purchase and refurbish a house in Abergavenny for the purpose of developing a supported accommodation provision for up to 5 care experienced young people. Approval is sought based on the business case that's set out in Appendix 1. The purchase will initially be funded using the existing borrowing headroom that was granted by full council on the 18th of April 2024, when it approved our new forward-looking policy on children's and young people's residential placements. Having said that, we will be applying through the Regional Partnership Board to the Welsh Government's Integration and Rebalancing Capital Fund and the Housing with Care Fund for the entire capital cost of the acquisition and refurbishment of the property. And I am very optimistic that the application will be successful. I also seek your approval to enter into a contract with a suitable external provider with experience of providing accommodation-based support to young people. A robust evaluation process and ongoing contract monitoring will be put in place to ensure that quality standards are maintained and that young people are provided with the individualised support that they require. And this is the approach that we took with the supported accommodation provision that we opened last year in Caldicot. So the Abergavenny House will provide a homely setting for 5 care-experienced young people, where 24-hour support will be available to assist the young people to develop their independent living skills. So during their stay in the provision, the goal is to equip the young people to progress onto accommodation that has a lower intensity of support, or even into independent accommodation. So this provision will form a vital step in a young person's pathway to independence. Cabinet should note that the local authority has a legal duty to provide sufficient and appropriate placements for children who are looked after, which includes a range of supported accommodation options for young people who have left or who are preparing to leave care. But at present, the local authority has insufficient suitable supported accommodation placements and limited options for young people who have medium to high support needs. Cabinet should also be aware that the acquisition of the property is through the open market from a private buyer, and there is some property-related risks identified within the business case, resulting in a number of necessary conditions being attached to the offer, including full legal due diligence. Furthermore, Welsh Government have recently refined their requirements in relation to children's care homes. The proposals for this property will now be classed as changing from a dwelling to an institution, and therefore subject to a change of use application under paragraph 6 of the statutory instruments. These requirements are factored into the delivery timeline. Finally, I'd just like to address the financial aspects in a bit more detail. As I said, we have applied to the Welsh Government for a £1,316,394.25 capital grant to purchase and redevelop the property, which would cover all of our capital costs. We do require, though, access to the capital borrowing headroom that we've agreed, pending the grant application being submitted and approved, or in the possibility that it is not approved. And in the business case, we've modelled both scenarios. Scenario 1, that the capital scheme is fully funded by the grant, and scenario 2, that the capital element has to be met through prudential borrowing. I should also say that the revenue costs of prudential borrowing are already factored into the Council's medium-term Treasury budgets, and therefore there's no consequential borrowing cost implication on the Children's Services budget. But for transparency and to aid in meaningful like-for-like comparison between the existing model of service delivery and this proposal, we have included an indicative annual borrowing cost within the business case calculations. So for this modelling, the cost of commissioning the support element of the service has been calculated based on an equivalent service model in our Caldicot property that I mentioned earlier, i.e. a local authority-owned property with a third-party contract to provide the care. And then the savings, projected savings, have been assessed on both a 100% occupancy rate and a more cautious 80% occupancy rate, using the typical costs of children currently either in fostering or residential placements, placements that are not best suited to their needs and who are assessed as requiring medium to high support needs in a step-down placement. And we've calculated the average weekly placement cost for such children is currently £3,071.83 each per week. So for 5 children, this would equate to £15,359 a week, or £798,765 per annum. So that's over £750,000 per annum. And these costs are currently met through Children's Services revenue budget. So the modelling shows that the best case scenario of 100% occupancy and no borrowing costs would achieve revenue savings of over £415,000 per year. But even the worst case scenario, with capital grants not received and only 80% occupancy in the property, still achieves revenue savings of over £87,000 a year. More details are in the report and the accompanying business case. Having said that, and having demonstrated the significant savings that this proposal would achieve, I should emphasise, though, that actually our primary driver is not through the savings. Our primary driver is to provide better and more local support that achieves better outcomes for our care leavers. And I'm very pleased that we're continuing to deliver on our policy to develop more in-house placements for looked after children and care leavers. And I hope you will give this your full support. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Chandler. I'm delighted that under your stewardship, the social services is quite literally counting every penny. But more importantly, as you pointed out, that we're finding a way that we really can support children looked after in loving homes, in a part of the community. And that for me is really something that I think we can feel justly proud about. Councillor Sumner.
Yes, please. I'd just like to briefly mention that Councillor Chandler and myself were a part of the corporate parenting panel, and we were there this morning, and it was fantastic to hear Charlotte Drury, one of the senior heads of service, saying how settled the young people are in the new home in Caldicot, and that it's warm and homely, and they're really settling in well. They're looking forward to a new young person joining them, and it's local to them. They've got a connection. So it was fantastic to hear.
That's really heartwarming, actually. Councillor Birch.
Thank you. I think you may have answered my question. I was going to ask about the first home that is being established in Caldicot, how that's going and how that's informing the development of the regarding the property in Abergavenny.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, and thanks, for the question. But also thanks, Councillor Sandals, for highlighting that. And I think I can expand a bit on that as well. So I think it's really good experience that we've had. So for those people that are not aware, we opened the similar home in Caldicot. It opened its doors in November last year. To date, 3 young people are living in the home, and as Councillor Sandal said, one more is due to move in the next 2 weeks. So the 3 young people that are there at the moment, they've settled in well, and they're working towards achieving their goals. And it's worth saying a little bit about what those goals are. So those goals include developing how to budget and manage their finances, around food, gaining confidence in food shopping and cooking skills, undertaking independent travelling, but also basic things like housekeeping, as well as looking ahead, seeking college and employment opportunities, and developing their positive decision making. These are all the types of support that are provided within the facility, and all of that was achieved through careful care planning and through developing excellent partnership working with the support providers. I would say that as part of that, there's a fortnightly joint meeting to review how things are going and to address any challenges. And we're working collectively to resolve any issues that may arise, either for the young people living there or for the service as a whole. So part of that also is the learning from this process is that a referrals panel has been developed, and that's been proved to be the most effective way for reviewing and discussing the suitability of young people who could potentially move into this home and to future homes in terms of matching and personal outcomes that are needed. The forum looks at the short, mid and long-term outcomes for young people and how the service and wider network can support the young person to achieve their goals and aspirations. There's other learning that's come out of that, which is really useful. So regards to delivering the service on time, this was achieved through fairly robust project management and partnership approach, which included colleagues in estates, children's services and our commissioning team, ensuring that the brief, the design, the expectation of the service were clearly communicated and monitored throughout. And there have been, that process has given us some more lessons, particularly with the tendering process, in terms of there were some initial queries and questions asked from potential service providers while carrying out the market engagement event, and that required further exploratory work, and we've acknowledged that and have reviewed and amended our tendering process to ensure that the aims and objectives of the proposed new scheme are clearly articulated, with the aim that would encourage a positive response from the tender from the support element. Other lessons include the importance of close partnership working and the time and care that needs to be taken in matching and helping young people manage the transition into the new scheme. So I think, we've learned a lot through that first scheme in Caldicot, which is informing, if you give the approval, this new scheme in Abergavenny, but also just that reassurance and that, that heartwarmingness that actually, even though it's only been open for less than 3 months, the Caldicot provision is really benefiting the young people in our care and is providing them with something that we weren't able to provide before we opened that facility. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to highlight that.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just very briefly add that I live not too far away from where this property is located, and I think it would make a really lovely home for children within our care. So I think it's going to be a real asset to us, and I think to those children which are cared for within it.
It's a really vibrant part of Abergavenny, a very, well, you'll know better, Councillor Callard, because you live in that area, but one which has got a huge community spirit.
Yeah.
And a real sense of mutual support across neighbours and families. So it's a great place, I think, well chosen. We're asked to approve the business case, which I think is fairly obvious here, but it's 4 components really. To acquire and refurbish a property in Abergavenny, to acquire and refurbish the property through drawing down the 3.5 million from the 3 million borrowing headroom we agreed at full council on the 18th of April under a 10-year term, and to submit an integration and rebalancing capital fund housing with care fund application to the Regional Partnership Board for the entirety of the capital expenditure, and to enter into a contract with suitable external provider to provide the housing-based support for young people residing at the property. So these are 4 aspects that need to be, I think, pushed through as quickly as possible. Are we agreed? Thank you very much, John. That's agreed. And with that, I'll bring Cabinet to the end. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Cabinet.
Bye.
Thanks all.
See you tomorrow.
Too late to go for a cup of